From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Tuesday in September. We got a lot to talk about here on today's show. We are going to be breaking down what we heard from Orioles president of baseball operations.
Hobo.
Not general manager, president of baseball operations, Mike Elias, as well as interim manager Tony Manscolino yesterday at their end of season press conferences. We are officially in the offseason. It is September 30th. It is a little bit of a chill in the air in Baltimore as I was going to get the first pumpkin spice latte of the offseason, John. That's when you really know, at least I do, that it's the off season is when I'm starting to get the fall drinks at Starbucks. But they closed two of the Starbucks on my way to work, so kind of had trouble finding this one.
Yeah, it's tough out there for a Starbucks.
It is, apparently.
Have I told you that? I've told the story like a bunch of times because I recently acquired a Dunkin' Donuts hat that I obviously wear all the time.
Nice. That's how very New England of you.
Yeah, I saw Noah Khan twice this weekend. I have a Dunkin' Donuts hat. Like, I'm very New England, but my town's claim to fame, Guilford, Connecticut, shout out. Is that there were four Dunkins in like a 1.5 mile stretch of like the main road in town.
Oh my gosh.
They put a Starbucks smack in the middle of it. Didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
Did not stand a chance.
Just no way. I'm surprised there weren't protests outside of it.
Yeah. I mean, not to say I didn't go there, but like when someone be like, hey, do you want to go to Starbucks? It's like, huh? Like what?
Why?
We could just drive around or like sit in a parking ride, but you want to go to Starbucks? Like it's like a very like big city thing to do. That wasn't us.
Well, I'm partial to Starbucks myself, but I will say, and we're sponsored by neither of these, so I guess we can speak openly about both these companies. You could get like twice the amount of stuff at a Dunkin' Donuts that you could at a Starbucks.
Yeah,
price wise.
Yeah, I mean,
if with given the same amount of money.
Yeah, I've settled into probably the worst habit of all when we're talking about coffee chains, which is I'll do like a Starbucks cold brew in the morning, and if I have the opportunity to get a Dunkin' in the afternoon, they'll pick me up. I'll do that.
Wow.
So
best of both worlds.
It's truly terrible. I shouldn't do at least one. And I think I know which one, but then I'd just not go to Dunkin' that much. So
look, we all have our crutches. Mine is the can of Coke Zero that I keep below my desk that I save for about 2:30 in the afternoon. I've got a box of them. If you want to stop by my desk after this, let me know.
I'm sure that hits real hard when the time comes.
It certainly does. All right. Let's talk about these Baltimore Orioles that just concluded their 2025 season, a disappointing one at that. The Orioles finished 75-87. The Banners, Andy Kuska was the only one of our Orioles staff to predict that the Orioles would not make the playoffs. You predicted they would make the playoffs. I predicted they would win 95 games to make the playoffs. Kyle Goon, I believe, predicted they would make the playoffs. Danielle Allentuck did the same. Andy was the only pessimist, and apparently pessimism pays because he was taking victory laps on Twitter last night.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like you're still like 13 games off.
And the thing is, Andy's not here to defend himself, but I'm still going to say it. I had to beg him to do these predictions. He was like, I don't know if I really want to do these predictions. I feel bad predicting stuff that who's covering these. Well, I'm also covering these guys. I'm like, Andy, just write the prediction. He does, and now he's taking victory laps about it. Unbelievable.
I hate predictions. I was rightfully made fun of in the press box. I think 2 years ago, the first year they made the playoffs. For my prediction for what was going to happen was like, I didn't make one, and everyone's like, why didn't you make it? It's like, why would I make it? I don't want to. And that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's just the answer.
All right, let's this Orioles team is obviously, the season has been over for quite a while. But now we are picking up the pieces from this season. I think we're going to spend a lot of the month of October doing so before we really turn the page over to November and the offseason. And Mike Elias yesterday did as good a job as he could in trying to flip that page, trying not to dwell on the season. It was a marathon press conference, as these things usually are. We had so much to talk about. 40 minutes long was Mike Elias' press conference, and this followed a 25-minute presser from Tony Mancolino. In terms of what Tony Mancolino had to say, I think the tough part is the guy is sitting in the chair, and he doesn't know if he's going to be in this chair in a month's time, in 2 months' time, when they start the season in March. So he is kind of walking this fine line of trying to give his honest assessment of the team while also trying to make a case to keep the job that he has, or to present his case that he did such a good job doing that he deserves another opportunity somewhere else. I think he did a pretty good job. Yeah. He certainly sounded optimistic and positive about the job that he did when he was looking back at his run as interim manager. He said, at no point was I ever overwhelmed. I feel like I can manage a big market team, a small market team. I can do it. It kind of stands in stark contrast to the comments he made when he first took this job, where he said, I didn't think this opportunity would come now, and I'm leaning a lot on the people around me, and I'm new to this, and I need a lot of help in a lot of ways, is what he said. Yeah. And yesterday he said, I can do this job. I can do this job in any market, which is what he needs to say. If you're in a job interview, you're not going to be in a job interview and say, I can't do this job. I can't do any job. But Tony Manscolino is now just thrown into a pool of candidates. And John, we said on last week's show, when we were discussing the possibility of the Orioles retaining Tony Manscolino's services, you said if we reach the end of a long process, a long interview process with Mike Elias in this Orioles front office, and Tony Manscolino was the guy at the end of that, that would not feel satisfying, because the Orioles have already seen over the last 4 months everything that they need to see from Tony Manscolino. And so if they then go out into the market and interview a bunch of candidates who are out there and then just say, you know what, Tony was good enough, let's just keep Tony, that would feel a little bit unsatisfying.
Yeah, it would just feel like they would know that. They would know, and you would want to have conviction that this is the guy. This is the guy they're trying to go forward with. And, I have bought a couple cars in my life, and I just decided I wanted the car that I got and got it. I didn't
and you got an electric car, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Good
work.
Yeah. Thank you. That was for tax purposes. It worked out okay. I really like it though, but I didn't shop for cars. It would have felt better about my decision if I had checked out a couple other ones and, maybe, but I don't understand the value of having a manager in-house. And then, what the Orioles front office probably doing once that press conference was over yesterday, just watching all the managers come available and oh, we got to talk to that guy. And if that's what you think, that's fine. But all the process playing out, and this isn't going to be a very long manager process, I imagine.
The Orioles had a head start on this, obviously.
They had a head start. It seems like these things move quickly anyways. But the fact that, I think Tony Manscolino might have said he within a couple of days he would know, kind of what the next step was. It feels like that's going to be because this is a process that moves really quickly, and every team that wanted to talk to any of the managers that lost their job yesterday, and there are plenty of good candidates, fit the bill of the experience. And Mike Elias said that they were going to, not prioritize, but value heavily. They're there. And that doesn't diminish the job that Tony Manscolino did. And
no.
I think that's I don't want to say it's a tricky thing, because it's an easy thing to say. He did a completely fine job. And I think there were also a lot of instances yesterday where Mike Elias was even after, we got better, but we weren't good enough.
Right.
And that's not Tony Manscolino's fault. But if you are open about saying that, then it should be pretty clear what you are going to try to do to change that.
Yeah, the elephant in the room is that all of these guys are hitting the market at the same time. And Mike Elias himself said he expects this to be a competitive market for a lot of these managers. You have openings in Washington, Colorado, now Minnesota, San Francisco, and Texas. And we saw a couple big names hit the open market yesterday. Bruce Bochy being one, multiple-time World Series winner. That happened well after the press conference, hours after that. So that was not something that Mike Elias was checking his phone about at the time that we know of.
Yeah.
Rocco Baldelli also hit the market yesterday, fired by Minnesota. And Bob Melvin in San Francisco also hit the open market. So there are some big names out there right now. And for an Orioles team that, could probably use a strong voice in the clubhouse to lead this team, I think that a lot of those names should intrigue Mike Elias. As for the job that Tony Manscolino did, Mike Elias said he did a terrific job. You mentioned it. He said, we're very impressed with him, that he was handed a very difficult assignment and that he did the most with it. As for whether Tony Mancolino will get a formal interview, Mike Elias did not say he's really come up with all the X's and O's yet for how they're going to conduct that. And why that matters is because Tony Mancolino was asked about that as well, if he would do an interview with the Orioles, because let's face it, he has given them 4 months of interviews while being in the interim role. And he said he has been given the advice by others not to take the interview if they give it to him because it's a little bit insulting. However, he said he will do whatever he needs to do and he will do whatever they ask him to do. Yeah. So he said that they've treated me well. I'm going to treat them well. After all of that talk between Manscolino and Elias yesterday, John, where do you put the percent chance? I would say odds, but odds are always a confusing thing to me. What would you put the percent chance that Tony Mancolino is hired as the Orioles' next manager next year?
I'm going to say like 20%.
Okay.
As he was talking about the interview thing yesterday, I was thinking like, what are the, Bob Melvin's going to be flying around doing 3 interviews and the Orioles are going to have an offer like printed out ready to give him. And then they're like, actually, we got to make sure we get Manso back in here. We're going to sit with him for 4 hours and make sure we know what's going on. And that happens as a Loyola basketball grad or Loyola grad. I believe they hired a basketball coach like who was internal after basically deciding they wanted to hire someone else at one point. And it's like not the most inspiring process.
No.
It feels like Tony Mancolino has done his interviewing. He would be a good candidate. But Mike Elias mentioned the demand, and you mentioned the demand there's going to be for managers. This is not, I don't feel like for the top candidates that the process is going to be very conducive to interviewing extensively the person who has been your interim manager for 4 months. That doesn't really seem like a process that's going to lead to.
Doesn't seem like it seems like wasted time.
What's going to happen if you want someone but want to make sure that Tony Mancolino isn't your guy, is the guy that you were thinking about hiring otherwise, you're going to take another job.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many of these. And I understand there's a lot of appeal to being here, but there's a lot of appeal to being everywhere. There's good players on all these teams. You can't be like precious about this being a special opportunity.
Yeah. In terms of whether the Orioles would go out and hire somebody with big league experience, with big league managerial experience, somebody like a Bruce Bochy, for example, Mike Elias was asked about that. And he said, yeah, for sure. Here was his full answer.
I think experience, when you go into any type of hiring process, experience is overwhelmingly a big positive. It is in our particular situation. I think it'll definitely carry a lot of weight given all the factors that you just described. If you look at history, it is not a requisite for managerial success, and it's not necessary, and nor does it guarantee the success. So, kind of like I said earlier, it'll all be weighed in the portfolio of the candidate and their other perceived strengths and areas of lacking. We'll just look at the whole picture and the person and try to decide who's best for us right now. But experience will definitely be an attractive feature by and large.
As it should be. I think experience should matter here because I think the Orioles are in a delicate situation right now where they have this core already in place. They got to win now. Yeah. This is not the situation that Brandon Hyde walked into in 2018 where he could take some lumps along the road. He could find his way as the team was finding its way because none of the pieces were in place then. Right now, the pieces should be in place to build a winner. So an experienced manager, in theory, would hit the ground running more than an inexperienced manager. He'd know how to run spring training. He'd know what he wants. He'd know when certain issues arise, like a player wants more playing time or a young player is struggling. He'd know how to handle that because he's done it before.
Yes.
But I also agree with Mike Elias there that it shouldn't be a requisite. If the best manager out there, if you think that the best ball knower is somebody who has never managed before, go and hire that guy because not all experience is good experience. Mickey Callaway has experience. Don't go hire Mickey Callaway. It has to be good experience.
Yeah. I think that I think about the flip side. And if there is someone, a former player who they are super convicted in being able to go sit in the dugout and do that job.
Ryan Flaherty.
Full stop. Well, yes, Ryan Flaherty, or even somebody that's not like on the hot list of coaching candidates. Somebody who's never been in the dugout.
Look at Stephen Vogt.
Yeah, if there is someone who is like that, that person would have been sitting next to Mike Elias yesterday, probably. Or we will be back in the warehouse bar and grill soon to
formerly Dempsey's, formerly Superbook Sports.
To meet that person, because that person has and would be already identified. And I'm not discounting that possibility that, experience and the winning of it all is matters. And I just was thinking about this as I was writing about it and as we were coming in here, because I figured we'd talk about this. The idea that these words have come out of my mouth, that the best way to make a quick impact is to have a veteran manager who's done it before. I said those words last week. I probably said it before. I just said them again, although just referencing the thing I said before. I want to just point out that is the exact type of like people just say it enough that you think it's true nonsense that like this front office probably would buck just for the sake of not participating in that. They probably have, Mike Elias said himself, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Some of these experienced managers who are available, like Bruce Bochy won a World Series, so not really in that category, but like Bob Melvin, it was like the coup of the century that the Giants got him out of Oakland after all the years he did a really good job in Oakland. It hasn't really worked out doing that. There are, Buck Showalter in New York. You can go on and on. We talked about Joe Girardi with the Phillies. These things sometimes work and sometimes don't. And I'm sure the Orioles know exactly the percentage of times and how often it works and the extent it works. And that's part of this too. But to sit here and say that even though Mike Elias mentioned that they're weighting this heavily in their search, it's the exact type of thing that they wouldn't do just because you think you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody who has big league experience, by the way, who has experience with the Orioles, Freddie Gonzalez. Should the Orioles give Freddie Gonzalez a call?
Absolutely.
I know a lot of Orioles fans were upset when he left the coaching staff and thought that they could have used his voice in the dugout and in the clubhouse. But
yeah, I mean, the irony of ironies is that he was brought in like as a break glass, in case of emergency guy on the staff, and then he wasn't there when the emergency happened. And, that's fine, but it's just kind of strange.
Yeah, there's going to be a mix of guys who have big league managerial experience out there. Obviously, everybody's thinking about, a lot of Orioles fans are, at least Skip Schumacher, but he is in the Rangers front office. I'm guessing that
it seems like he's got a job lined up.
Yeah, I think the Bruce Bochy move kind of opened the door for Skip Schumacher to take that job in Texas.
Thanks for the chip, Boch.
Yep.
You can work in the front office if you want to.
But that was also a move that worked. The Rangers hired that experienced big league manager who had won before, and they won like that. And it fizzled out quickly after that, but it worked.
The Reds are in the playoffs right now.
Exactly.
That's not something you would have thought was going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think, and I have the transcript up here and I'm not going to look through 11 pages, but I think that Mike Elias said a couple times, like, they're going to pick the best manager for 2026. And I think that's important. Like, this is the priority. Like, something that's going to be impactful fast.
Yeah. All right. In terms of the process of hiring a manager, Elias said ASAP is when they want to get that hiring done. He also talked about the voices that are in the room when they are making this decision. He mentioned the ownership group. He also mentioned a name that I was not expecting him to mention, and that is Katie Griggs, who's the president of business operations and in the Baltimore Orioles. He said members of her side of the organization, I'm sure, will be involved. Here was his full answer when I asked for a follow-up as to what kind of role the business operations department would have in hiring a manager, and especially Katie Griggs.
Oh man, I mean, you have a real integrated in a well-functioning organization, business and baseball. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of cooperation that happens, and there's a lot of interaction with the manager's chair, and also she wants the team to win and be successful. And she's got experience in baseball and worked for Seattle, and is very bright and has a lot of good judgment on hiring. So we're tapping into that resource, but we're all part of one team. And I think one of the big things I'm most excited about with this ownership group is the growth and development and talent that we brought in on the business side of the operation. And we're going to be seeing a lot of cool new stuff here at Camden Yards as a result of those. So we all work together very closely.
That struck me, John. And I know that we disagree as to the importance of mentioning Katie Griggs in this instance. And I want to hash this out here. I thought it was unique because not often would a general manager or president of baseball operations mention the business side of the organization when hiring a new manager. Now, when hiring a general manager, I could see it because I think the general manager, his purview extends far beyond the field. But a manager's experience should really only be in 4 places: in between the lines on the field, in the dugout, in the clubhouse, and in the press conference room. Now, he should also be good at the other stuff, being a member of the community, knowing what's going on. But in reality, a manager shouldn't have to care about the planned renovations at Camden Yards or the new value meal at Camden Yards or the things that we are told Katie Griggs handles. And I don't want to make mountains out of molehills here, but to me, I didn't really understand why the business side of things should have a role in hiring the manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of whys to me. One of them, and I've written it, and Kyle Goon has written it, and we've talked about it a lot, is that this is a very insular front office that is pretty set in their ways and their perspectives, and any kind of other perspective from within the organization could help. Now, is it going to be is Katie Griggs going to have veto power? I don't think so. I can't imagine that to be the case. Is David Rubenstein or Michael Elias going to have veto power? Maybe.
Sure.
Very much maybe. Is Cal Ripken going to be in that room? Maybe. Is he going to have a say? Maybe. And I think that is, I think that the feature, not the bug, of this front office working here and doing all the good work that they did in the early stages was that they didn't have to do any of that stuff. They could just do whatever they wanted because, there was a lot of focus on the concerts and the PPP. I think is what I don't remember what PPP stands like because it was like some kind of construction.
Oh yeah.
The public-private partnership.
It is.
That's what it was. I got it. Those were the exact words of John Angelos at some point.
Yes.
And the baseball team was not necessarily on that top of that list, so that is why Mike Elias and his team got to do whatever they wanted, and it went pretty well. And I think we're going to touch on the adapt and evolve thing. I think there's a value to having other perspectives. You mentioned Mickey Callaway before. There are women in the Orioles front office, but I think it is important to have as many women in the room as possible as you're interviewing a manager, because this is a person who you don't want to have to be answering questions about later if that perspective is not given in the moment.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that.
Yes. And just by virtue of saying that, I didn't want to say that you didn't think that. I know you think that, and I just wanted to I just want to say that I didn't think it was a huge deal. What I did kind of get, what I did get a modest sense of is that there was like a broadening of responsibilities that was happening at the very least at that table in front of that microphone, and that maybe is happening in reality, and that part of if we're saying there's any kind of adaptation, this is going to be a bigger tent. On a basic level, like everything you said about the business side being upgraded feels like it's true. I'm sure there are many fans who are listening to this and watching this who are not thrilled with those people right now, and by extension of that, with me saying that. But it feels like it can't be a bad thing, and it feels like maybe not as I'm sure Katie Griggs' week and her team's week more time will be spent doing other things than interviewing managers.
Yes.
And that's okay. But I think that having them involved is okay too.
I also think this could have been just lip service hat tip to David Rubenstein here, because Mike Elias didn't hire Katie Griggs. David Rubenstein hired Katie Griggs. He brought her in here and gave her a fair amount of power, brought her in from the Seattle front office. And Elias did mention, she has experience with other big league teams. She was also just the president of business operations with Seattle as well. So it's not like she was ever in a front office. But this could be Mike Elias just saying, we'll listen to all the people that you brought in, David, and you will be as part of this process by extension of the people that you hired as well as you can be.
Yeah. And like there were not stakeholders here. Like there were not stakeholders here up until a couple years ago. It was just Mike answering to John Angelos.
Yeah.
That was it. Now that's not how it works. So this is just as much, an acknowledgement of the reality that's happening as anything else.
Do you think Grant Hill will have a say in this?
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Isn't he still part of the ownership group?
Yeah,
he was part of the group that was initially brought on with David Rubenstein.
Yeah, no, he is for sure.
Maybe he'll get a text about this, and I can't imagine he would be in the interview room, but you never know.
He'll be around. Sorry, I'm just sending you a message here. Can you see it?
Yeah. No, you're good.
Cool. There's a board there's a board that's not lit up. That's typically lit up. And I'm incredibly concerned by that.
Don't worry. Don't worry. People can actually hear us, John.
Okay, cool.
I've figured out a workaround. I'll explain after the podcast ends, but nothing to worry about here, folks.
No need.
No need to worry.
As long as it's working.
Our very high tech setup here and the Banner Baseball Show is all working. At least we think. Let us know if you can't hear us. Well, manager might not be the only hire that the Orioles make this winter.
Good transition.
They might also make a general manager hire. They might not
maybe make
a general manager hire. As we know, Mike Elias was handed this new role of president of baseball operations, not business operations, president of baseball operations last winter. But we didn't know it at the time because the Orioles never announced it. We only knew it through reporting originally by The Athletic, confirmed by our own Andy Kuska, that Mike Elias received this promotion, that the Orioles were looking to bolster their front office with other hires, potentially a general manager. This was the first time we got to talk to Elias since we found out that news. Here's what he had to say about how that promotion came about.
I know that came out in a bit of an unusual way. That was an arrangement that we reached this year in the spring, early in the spring. And at that point in time, with everything that we had going on, it wasn't a huge immediate priority for me to announce that, or for us to announce that. And as we got into the season and things started to go the way that they went, it was nowhere near my mind at that time to address that situation. But that is the case. It does provide us the ability to utilize the general manager title in a way that many other organizations and a growing number of other organizations are starting to utilize it to beef up the throughput, but also the talent in the front office. And it's something that we have begun to consider and explore. But obviously it's got to be the right person, the right fit for the Orioles, for the org, for the whole situation. And it may not happen imminently, but that is a pathway that's available to us, and it's something that we may be interested in doing. It may be this offseason, it may not be.
Can you explain a little bit more about what this, if you do decide to hire another GM, what this person would be doing that's different from what you do now?
I think the answer to that very much depends on who it is. I think what's very clear to me is there's a lot of work in baseball operations now, running these departments on a day-to-day basis. It's a ton of work. We have a relatively small baseball operations department still, and we have room to grow. And we're also very interested in outside perspectives and outside talent. So that can come in different profiles and backgrounds and job duties. And it's something that I think we would tailor depending on who the person is. But there's certainly room for more high-level contributions to our department. We want people that can help us, but we also want people that can challenge us in a lot of areas, especially after you come off of a year where the organization didn't meet its goals.
All right, so John, first let's talk about the promotion for Mike Elias and how he received that and why he didn't announce it. I totally understand if you get to May and you haven't announced it yet, saying, let's probably hold off on this because the Orioles are down the tubes. let's not go ahead and say that our GM got a promotion to president of baseball operations. I can't see that going over well with the fan base. However, what was stopping them from just announcing it at the time? Well, Mike Elias just said it didn't feel like something that we needed to announce. I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, if only to prevent what happened.
Sure.
Know, as you're deciding to just like keep this under your hat, you would hope that at some point someone says, I understand that, but like this is not going to be secret forever. And like,
right.
Is whatever happens in a month, 4 months, 6 months from now going to be worth not saying it now? And I don't think that probably was. But you also have to remember, David Rubenstein was down there the first week of spring training. I believe, basically everyone that associated with the Baltimore Banner also was. So it sticks out to me. It could have happened around then. And if you think about, there's two like sides of this coin. Like while he was there, I asked him, like, do you endorse basically like the way that Mike handled this offseason, all these short-term deals, all these kind of like stopgaps, not the long. And he said, yeah, like this is really smart. And Andy asked him directly again, and he on the side, and he said, yes, this is really smart. Of course he's going to say that if you promoted him. That is how that goes. But on the flip side, that felt like a relevant question to ask, because that was not the Orioles offseason that anyone expected them to have. There was a pretty high level of frustration with it. So if Mike Elias, who knows what is going on and what is said about him and about the Orioles pretty intimately, is feeling like there is scrutiny on him and pressure on his role, and doesn't feel like there's a proper level of, enthusiasm for what happened, I don't know if he's going to want to like poke his head above the bunker and say, by the way, guys, I just got promoted, and then like pop back down. Like,
right.
I understand that. But the consequences of that are it coming out this way. And that remains weird.
I think the ideal situation, the ideal scenario that Mike Elias and David Rubenstein were envisioning here is that the Orioles get off to a flying start. That Kyle Gibson signing, boy, does he would look like a bargain at $5.5 million. And Tomoyuki Sugano is terrific, which he was for the first half of the season.
Yeah.
And, Charlie Morton's working out, and Tyler O'Neill is healthy, and everything's going great. And the Orioles hire somebody in June that they really like from the Tampa Bay Rays front office. And they make him the GM, and we say, by the way, Mike Elias is the president of baseball operations now. So we now have our front office bolstered and in place. But the exact opposite of that happened.
Yes.
The Orioles went off to such a terrible start, didn't have anybody that they could hire in the middle of the season. And then this news comes out by accident late in the year. So I think the plan was to keep this under wraps until the Orioles had somebody ready and lined up to take that GM job. It didn't happen that way. And it was exacerbated by the fact that the Orioles had such a poor season that made it look worse.
Yeah. And I think it's, and I don't think it was, I think it was, they tried to communicate in the aftermath of this coming out. And I think Mike did a much better job of kind of clarifying the practicality of that. Is that, I think back, there was a nice, fun story in The Athletic at some point this year about how silly all the titles in baseball have gotten with directors of pitching and hitting and, offensive strategy and, this and that. And it's just like, yes, they're all made up, but they're made up so that to prevent teams from taking somebody and giving them that role themselves. So
right.
If you want to keep your pitching coach, someone else can make him the director of pitching.
And that counts as a promotion.
Counts as a promotion. You have to, you not required, but you need to let them interview for that job. And then some of your trade secrets get out, and then maybe you lose that person. And
right.
Then, so you make the person the director of pitching. And like, it's very clear now that the Orioles just want to be able to have an opening for someone, whether it's, the hot young, Ivy League person who's shooting up in another organization, to make that person the general manager, to make somebody internally the general manager, to prevent them from leaving. And backfill with somebody who's, of a lower level to take a former player. I know there's a lot of these POBO GM arrangements have former players who are in the GM spot to give that perspective. They just wanted to have the opportunity to do this. And when Mike Elias is your GM, you can't hire a second GM. You could, I'm sure, but that would be weird. And I don't know why anyone would do that.
Co-GMs, yeah.
So the mechanics of this make a lot of sense the way that he talked about it. And it doesn't seem like there's necessarily that. It seems like that process is kind of like ongoing in the same way that like you're making like your Sunday sauce, where like it's on the stove. It's not, you're stirring it every once in a while, but it's
simmering.
There's other stuff going on. You're watching football, you're making macaroni, there's other stuff going on. And I think there's other stuff that's more pressing, but I'm very fascinated to see how they utilize it, because, when this all came out, what I wrote was that it was kind of seemed very Orioles-y, but like I made sure to put in there that they could hire someone as a manager or in this role that is completely different from them. And that would be a change.
Yeah.
And that remains a possibility, but it just seems like that's kind of a back burner deal right now.
It does. And it also, in that answer, Mike Elias mentioned that he would be very much open to the idea of bringing somebody in who has different ideas, who can challenge them. And I think that's something that we have called for in the past. And that's something that they could definitely use. So Mike Elias did not mention his ideal candidate. He said it really just depends on what kind of person interviews, what kind of person intrigues them, what they might bring to the table. My ideal person, just from the outside, would be somebody who is going to come in with different thoughts, different ideas. They don't need to be as you have said before in this podcast, capital B, capital M, baseball man, or baseball woman. They just need to be somebody who maybe has the authority and feels empowered to say, hey, I've done this at different places. I've gotten intel at different places. Here's my perspective on this that you might not be seeing, because there are a lot of things that the Orioles did this offseason that did not work. And Mike Elias was candid about that. He said, there are some things I would go back and do again. There are some things I would go back and learn from and say, that's a lesson learned. I won't do that again. Interesting kind of timing for all of this. As for whether the Orioles would hire a GM before a manager, I think he said that's ideal, but probably not going to happen. I mean, I think they're probably going to get the manager hiring done in the next 2 weeks, maybe, depending on who's bounced from the playoffs when. But I think that this managerial search is going to be over fairly quickly, and then maybe a GM will be hired in a few months, maybe not.
Yeah. I would guess that would be the case, that it would be fast.
You think that's the order of things too now?
Manager feels more pressing, because GM feels like kind of like a GM meetings, winter meetings. Like, we'll meet with some people. I'm sure they have a list. I'm sure they have some targets, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
And to be able to work with, to be able to work with like this front office is probably going to be able to work with the manager that they chose. I mean, I was fascinated that you kind of had two. We're kind of going off on tangent, but in like Rocco Baldelli and Bob Melvin, the two first managers to come available yesterday, you have people very different stripes and different like backgrounds, but who have worked with, progressive and data-driven front offices before and are well regarded. And it's not necessarily like, I don't know that you would ever say they were all like completely aligned with but they executed the vision and executed the roster that data-driven front office gave them and did a good job with it. And like, whoever the GM is going to be able to operate within that framework, I think.
Yeah. You also wrote a column on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the answer that Mike Elias gave to one of your questions. You asked a question, I don't know, 30 minutes into this 45-minute marathon about what Mike Elias learned from this past season. And that might have been his shortest answer of the day.
Oh, it was, Paul. It was.
He said, quote, he paused first. Then he said, you have to evolve. You have to adapt in this game. That's always been the case, but that's the most concise lesson I can draw, end quote. John, do you buy it? Do you think that Mike Elias will adapt, that he will evolve this offseason?
I did not think that in the moment that I heard that answer. I was spent like a lot of time thinking about it. Obviously, I drove home. I got a bagel. You were behind me on the highway.
I was.
veered off. I got a bagel.
I did see you veer off. I didn't know it was to get a bagel.
Well, yeah, and also to go to my house. Yeah.
Okay.
I
won't say what exit you got off.
It was the Key Highway exit. It says it in my bio on the website that I live in Riverside. It's fine.
Now people know where to send their hate mail.
It was somebody stole a package from my stoop overnight.
Oh,
Protein.
yikes.
Saw, dude. Gosh, where was I? I arrived at the idea that he did mean that, and that, like, as somebody who has written and spoken that he is in active search of one such lesson, like the idea of actually getting one, I felt the need to ask it directly, and I understand why I didn't get one. And I understand why he answered that the way that he did. Where I arrived as I was going through the rest of the things he said are that there are meaningful areas where they can adapt and evolve, where they either have tried to and it didn't succeed, or they feel like they haven't and they need to. He said point blank that they are not going to approach like the hitting side the same as they did last year. I think he said absolutely not. He gave a longer answer and he said, are we going to do the same things, exact same things this year as last year? Absolutely not.
Yep.
Which stands in a little bit of contrast to, I believe, in spring training, Cody actually basically said, like, we're kind of doing what we did. Like, it's me, it's Sherm, it's Tommy Joseph. Like, I know these guys, Sherm knows these guys, Tommy knows his stuff, but like, we are doing things the same way that we have because we feel like that process is good. Tony Manscolino completely endorsed the process. I am not, I'm not bringing a shovel to the bury the hitting coach party. That's not something. Miss me. I'm not even going to RSVP. I'm just not coming. But he said that, like Mike Elias said, like that is an area, like he said, it was alarming. I don't have the full quote in front of me. I logged out of my computer.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, but he basically said like it was concerning to watch all the hitters, to watch their young hitters who all this is built on regress in the way that they did. And it was concerning to watch it all happen at the same time. And that is an area where they need to kind of like evaluate and see what they need to do. Yeah. That is, if we had to say there are like three cores, if we had to like rank the core fundamental things they've held dear, it's like, we're going to draft these hitters and we're going to train them this way. And they're going to be good because we drafted them and we trained them this way. That feels like a pretty strongly held principle that this organization has had for a long time. They believed it against the evidence as things kind of fell apart last year, and they believed it through this year when it didn't really work out. So for him to say we are evaluating this, it's one thing to evaluate. They've said they were evaluating stuff before and nothing's really changed. Nothing really changed after they evaluated it last year. But that is an area where they can evolve and adapt, because it feels like just waiting for like mean reversion in a positive way for all these guys who underperformed is not really the move. I would also say he said he made some comments about on the medical side, there's going to be possible like hires and restructuring and medical and sports science on injuries. Like that is a way, like, and they just hired Scott Behringer last year. So that is an area where even though they, I'm sure, are very convicted in what they're doing, I don't think they're in a position to sit there and say, well, we think this is right. We think what we did was right. I think there's going to be a ton of that this offseason too. I think there's going to be a lot more, good process, bad outcome. Let's try it again. But I also think there are going to be areas where they do make things look different. And that is, if that's evolving and adapting, then sure. Did I want him to say directly, like, I realized that we over-indexed hard contact in terms of drafting players, and we couldn't really do anything about it in this year's draft, but next year we're only going to focus on guys who don't swing and miss at all, as opposed to a mix of all. Did I expect him to say something like that? No. Could he have? Sure. Does that stuff happen without us knowing about it? Probably.
Yeah.
So I kind of arrived at, I did buy it, but it's also such a low bar because there's no evidence over a very long period of time at this point that they have done any of that adapting and evolving is something they've really put at the forefront. They have gotten this far by believing what they believe and doing what they believe in, almost without contrariness, like without any kind of counter to that. They haven't run a jet sweep to get everybody going one direction, they go the other. They're just power I. They're going one way.
Yeah.
They're doing it. They're running downhill. They're running downhill in the direction they think is the best way to move forward. And when I hear, I also feel like uncomfortable endorsing that, because I don't think that's a very satisfying answer for anyone to hear. And I anyone that listens to this knows what it sounds like when I'm struggling with something, and that's what it sounds like. I'm sure.
Well, because we also don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know.
We don't know. He gave a very concise answer there. The proof is going to be in the pudding this offseason. And there are certain areas that certainly the fans would look to, areas where Mike Elias and this front office and this organization should adapt and evolve. I think the first one is the approach to hitting. You talked about it. I couldn't find the exact quote, but Mike Elias basically saying that they are absolutely not going to do things the exact same way. You mentioned on the last podcast that whoever gets to take that manager's chair next year might not get to hire his own hitting coaches. Maybe he will. Maybe they will. Maybe he or she who takes this managerial job will get to insert their own hitting coaches, or get to at least have some kind of say as to the hitting philosophy that is in this organization. There's also the approach to drafting hitters and not taking pitchers, and drafting certain kinds of hitters. We didn't see that really change too much last July.
No.
And I don't expect that to be an area that the Orioles change a whole lot in. And I think the third area, and perhaps the one that is on the forefront of most fans' minds as they enter this offseason, is spending. Are they going to be an organization that hands out $100 million contracts? They have not been under Mike Elias. The only big contract they've signed anybody to is Tyler O'Neill, and that looks like that's going to be an opt-in for Tyler O'Neill, which means it's going to be 3 years and about $50 million.
I think he's going to pick that one up.
I think so. I don't think we need to do a breaking emergency podcast when that happens. Tyler O'Neill is really the only big fish that they've ever signed in free agency under Mike Elias. Will Mike Elias change his approach to that? And will this front office feel more emboldened by the ownership group that is now behind them that they're going to do that? So there are areas, I think, that we will see this offseason sooner rather than later, if Mike Elias has really decided to change things up, or if he's going to stick with what got him here. And you said perfectly, when the Orioles drafted all those hitters in the first few rounds of last July's draft, that it would almost be more alarming if they drafted a bunch of pitchers. The Orioles changed up everything and said, everything that we're doing is terrible. Let's do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Do like the George from Seinfeld, George Costanza way of just opposite day. He goes opposite of all of his instincts, and it ends up working perfectly. If the Orioles did that, I would be more concerned, because you'd say, what does this team really believe in?
Yeah.
What are they just going to go whichever way the wind blows? But that doesn't mean that they should be sticks in the mud and just keep ramming their head against the wall, when clearly the results from 2025 show not everything they do works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the old, they're not like tigers changing their stripes, but they're adapting to climate change.
Yes.
They can't stay where they are. They gotta go somewhere else. I would just point out, and I think part of the issue that I had was he's talking about, Kyle Bradish and Trevor Rogers and their emergence, and how they're looking for a front half of the rotation starter. That's incredibly vague, and also something we've heard before.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say that and they go out and trade for Corbin Burns, and sometimes they say that and there's no Corbin Burns walking through that door. I think on the free agent and spending front, he said, you can't be wasteful and you got to make sure the rubber's hitting the road, which to me meant like we have to get good value for our money, but we will spend our money. And we have heard that before. And that is not necessarily a huge departure now. The analogy I use all the time is like, are the sliders going to get changed? Is it, are you willing to pay more for one win in free agency than you would have 2 years ago? Like, sure, maybe. Are you able to take on more risk because you don't really care about the money? Maybe. But these are all things that, and I think that the through line of all the things that, as we spend an hour listening to people talk yesterday, and now people are spending an hour listening to us talk.
Yep. They're listening to an hour of us talking about an hour of them talking.
Yeah, it's making my head hurt too. Is that this all became, I'm not gonna go like trust the process here, but like it felt yesterday there was a large shift towards, it's going to be the outcomes that determine whether things go well here going forward rather than the processes. It's going, all the things he said of like, we're all going to be part of this manager process and everyone's going to have an input and then we're going to arrive at someone who's best for us now. And that will only really be determined if the team is good. And we're going to evaluate what we need to do with the hitting side. And we're going to do things differently. Like the success of that will only be in the results and free agency and how they get value. And that'll only be in the results, and adding a front half starting pitcher, that'll only be in the results. And all these things are going to be so tied to the results that it kind of took the legs out of like evaluating any of it on its own merits sitting here on September 29th or 30th or whenever you're doing it. There's no real point to it because all that matters is that thank God the season is over and like, can something please happen to make it not happen again? Like that's all it really comes down to. And yes, it's just this person sitting in a chair talking. Like that is worth what it is, period. But in this circumstance, feels like it was, I don't know if it was intentional or just a cumulative effect. It only felt like it's all pointing towards what the results will be next year. And any changes that make the results better will be considered good ones, and anything that says it'll all be based on the results.
Yeah, the Orioles can't be in a situation in a few months where they are calming themselves.
Sorry, I remembered part of that.
You go first.
He very specifically said, and I think this might actually get us towards where you want to go at the end, when he said, we want to have a club at the start of spring training.
Yes.
That we feel like, and all of you feel like, and all the fans feel like, and everyone in our division and baseball industry feels like can compete for a division. That is an incredibly specific and incredibly strange. Not strange. It's a very specific target. It's a very specific thing to be going for. And it basically says we want to win the offseason, which is not something.
A little bit. Yeah.
We want to win the offseason and we want to be perceived as a team that can do that.
It won't placate any fans for them to sign 3 pitchers to $10 million deals.
Yeah.
It just won't. It needs to be, and for them to say, well, we tried to get X. We tried to go out and get Framber Valdez and Dylan Cease, and we just couldn't. What they did last offseason was that. They said, well, we tried to get Corbin Burns. We offered him a deal that was pretty good, and this is, we feel okay about plan B. We tried to bring Anthony Santander back, but we feel pretty good about Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah.
How hard they tried, I don't really know. But that won't make anybody feel better going into next year. That will only make fans angrier. And the comment about wanting to have a team that is ready to compete in the AL East, by the way, I think stuck with people because people have picked up on the fact, if you follow what Mike Elias has said closely over the last several years, since this team started being good, you'll pick up on the fact that he rarely sets expectations at the World Series, at the pennant.
Yeah.
He often sets expectations at the division. Yesterday, he was talking about how he wanted to build a team that fans believe, he believes, the outside world believes is going to be good enough to compete for an AL East title. He didn't say World Series. And Andy Kuska asked him specifically about, well, you said AL East. Does that also mean that you are trying to build a World Series contender? Yeah. Here's what Elias had to say.
Mike, you said twice today that the goal for next year is to be in the mix for the AL East title. Is it reasonable then to assume that it's the goal for this organization to win a World Series next season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the goal for every organization. I think there's a group of players that we have that we feel like we're platforming us to do that. And we have the chance to do that in 2026. I speak that way because first things first is the regular season. You've got a 162 game regular season, and winning the division is a huge accomplishment. And then the playoffs kind of come after that. But I don't, you try to build a team that's going to win the AL East. That's a pretty good team for World Series aspirations too.
So if you know much about modern front offices, if you've read the book Moneyball or watched the movie, you know that statisticians, front offices, modern front offices believe playoffs are random. Yeah. Playoffs are luck. Playoffs are not an indicator of how good your team is because there's such a small sample size and things get so weird in October. And if you build a good 162 game winner, then you have built a good team, regardless of what happens in October. They still want to win World Series, but they're not going to feel like they were a total failure because they built a 101 win team and that team got swept in 3 games by the Texas Rangers.
Yeah.
When the Orioles got swept by the Texas Rangers, Mike Elias stood up there and said, "We are still champions of the AL East." So that kind of is an indicator of how Mike Elias thinks. And I think there is merit to that because you have to get there first. Look at this past year's team. If he was saying in spring training, we need to be a World Series team, and then he looks even worse when they don't even make the playoffs. You have to climb the mountaintop in the regular season before you can climb the mountaintop in the playoffs. But I also understand fans' frustration with not setting the expectation high and setting the bar so low that you end up setting your own players' expectations low and not shooting high enough. Where do you fall on this, John?
I felt like it was, the thing to say. You just say it. And I feel like it's fine, but it's not what
fans want to hear.
Yeah. And but I think I just keep coming back to, this is like their assessment is the one that will matter. Whatever Omar spits out as like their win projection, like I'm only, I think, convinced in that being like a high enough number to compete for and win the AL East. That's what matters. It doesn't matter what I think. You know what's going to happen next February and March, as everyone who covers this team and thinks about this team is expected to give their predictions? Everyone's going to go low because they got embarrassed this year.
Yes.
I know I'm going to.
Yeah. I am too.
So, and I'm not really embarrassed. I really could care less about my predictions, but I'm not going to say this team's going to win 90 some games and make the LCS. That's for sure. So, and it's going to be a show me. And like, it just comes down to like, yeah, it will be great if they have a great offseason and everyone thinks, and national reporters are coming back through Sarasota to see, the revitalized Orioles with big free agent hitter X and, Manly Man Y at the top of their rotation. And like, this is going to be different. They learned their lesson. Like I'm sure I will read all those stories. I'm sure everyone listening to this will read them too, but we're not really talking about that mattering. The only thing that will matter if they do that is because those are going to be players who are projected to be like 4 or 5 win players that make this team better.
Yeah.
That's what like it's all outcome based. It's all based on whether the things that need to happen for them to not be bad again happen. And there's not a ton of heft behind anything other than that.
Yeah. I think a good way to look at this is 2 teams who are playoff teams in the National League right now. One is the Brewers. One is the Dodgers. 2 teams with vastly different payrolls. Dodgers, the top of the league in terms of payroll. Yeah. Brewers, much, much farther down the list. Much, much less star power in Milwaukee than in LA. The Dodgers, given their payroll, given their talent level, given their own expectations, they were hoping to win 100+ games this year during the regular season. They set their expectations so incredibly high by spending as much as they could on Blake Snell and all of the guys that they did, even on top of the talent that they already had.
Yeah.
The Brewers, their expectations were probably, I don't know what their over-under win total was before the year, but it was not the 97 games that they won. The Brewers hit on their top 5% outcome.
Yeah.
They exceeded expectations. They overachieved. They won 97 games. They punched above their weight class. They made the playoffs and got the 1 seed in the National League. The Dodgers underachieved. They did not reach the expectations everybody thought they would. They only finished 4 games apart in the standings. And by the end of October, the Dodgers could very well still be the champions, not the Brewers.
Yeah.
They could of the National League, let alone the World Series. So the team that Mike Elias built last year, I think he was the way that he builds these teams, these winners, is to try to be the ones that hit their top end outcome and try to win 97 games. And you can get there that way. I mean, 2023 was a perfect example of everything worked for the Orioles. That was like the top 1 percentile in terms of outcome.
Yeah.
And everything went great, and they won the AL East. This past year, the win total was not projected to be as high. The talent level was not projected to be as high. If everything went perfectly, they could have been a playoff team, but they weren't. So the Dodgers they create so much room for error by just the sheer amount of talent that they bring in and the sheer amount of money that they spend. And the teams like the Brewers and the Orioles still have the potential to be playoff teams and World Series contenders, but the margin for error is so much smaller. And what money does is it increases your margin for error. And so what the Orioles need to do here is increase their margin for error, build depth upon depth, bring in star level players, not just filler players.
Yeah.
If they do that, then they set the floor much higher, and then the ceiling will come in turn. But they need to set that floor a lot higher, because we thought that the floor was high in 2025, was not nearly as high as we thought it was. And they hit the floor. Their floor was 75 wins, and they did that. Spend money, acquire better players, raise your floor, and the ceiling will come.
Yeah. Couldn't
Sorry,
say it better.
that's
it's true. No, and I thought, and that's something that I thought a lot about. It's like the floor was lower than all the moves they made in the roster they had, because I think there was a lot of, I think we set the expectations for what the floor of what was already here, obviously too high. And I think that's a big part of this too.
Yeah. All right. We've already gone on for about an hour, over an hour. Let's do some quick hitters real quick before we get out of here from the Mike Elias press conference. Some player-specific news. One, Grayson Rodriguez is expected to begin ramping up a throwing program in October and is expected to be ready for the start of spring training. And we have heard this before. We've heard other timetables that have not come to fruition before. It is at least positive that Mike Elias is not delivering any bad news about Grayson Rodriguez now. Another one, Heston Kjerstad, somebody who was optioned to AAA Norfolk middle of the season after he struggled mightily in the big leagues, hit very poorly in a few Norfolk games, and then ended the season on the injured list. We don't really know what's going on. We still don't really know. He's undergoing treatment for a medical condition, according to Elias, and he's responded favorably to treatment, and he will be in spring training. Elias sounded optimistic about his recovery, but he did not specify as to whether this is the myocarditis that plagued him early in his pro career, whether it's another issue. He did not go into that. One more, Tyler Wells. Finished the season as a starter. A lot of people look at him as a reliever. Will he be a starter? Will he be a reliever? Mike Elias says he's a starter for now, but that could change. He's good in both roles. Any other things that I missed there, John?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I would say he also gave a pretty full-throated Adley Rutschman endorsement.
Yes, we didn't even get to talk about that.
Yeah, and I think
we heard that at this time last year.
Yeah, and what else?
It matters because they just signed Samuel Basayo, another catcher, to an extension. But Mike Elias said he is a frontline catcher. You and I did not expect the Orioles to seriously consider trading Adley Rutschman. I think some people on the outside have.
Yeah.
We could be totally wrong and we could not know what we're talking about, but I really don't think the Orioles are going to trade Adley Rutschman because of the fact that he has 2 years left on a fairly cheap deal, given his arbitration raises in the next 2 years.
Yeah, not going to get more expensive.
Not going to get that much more expensive considering the year he just had. And Samuel Basayo is not a finished product behind the plate.
Yeah.
Adley Rutschman is. They love what Adley Rutschman brings defensively and calling games. And I'm sure we'll do a lot more talking about Adley Rutschman, but I think he's going to be here.
Yes, he will be.
All right.
As will we.
At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. We will have a lot more podcasts for you. Like, rate, review, subscribe, share the Banner Baseball Show with all your friends and family. Write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in all season long. We have so much more yet to come. We really appreciate your support, your listenership, your follows, your readership, all of that good stuff. And we are going to be with you. We'll have another episode at some point next week. Maybe the Orioles will have a manager at that point. Who's to say?
Maybe.
Who's
Yeah. No, I was going to say I'm going to be in Italy, but I'm going to be in Italy next week, the week after that. So.
Okay. John's going to Italy. Yeah. I went to France. John's going to Italy. We'll all have, maybe you might see some Orioles players there enjoying some vacation.
Maybe.
Thanks so much for tuning in. For John Meoli,